We continue where we left off, inshallah, and we start the sixth book from the 6 books of hadith, which is Sunan Ibn Majah. And we start off with an extremely brief biography of Imam Ibn Majah, rahimahullah. So his kunya is Abu Abdullah, and he is Muhammad ibn Yazid al-Raba'i Mawlahum, well known as Ibn Majah al-Qazwini. Abu Abdullah Muhammad ibn Yazid al-Raba'i Mawlahum Ibn Majah al-Qazwini. And al-Raba'i is an ascription to the tribe of Rabi'a, and there are 6 tribes that are known to be from Rabi'a. 6 tribes from the tribes of Arabs are known from Rabi'a, and the scholars could not determine to which tribes from these 6 tribes is the ascription of Imam Ibn Majah, rahimahullah. And we said Mawlahum, al-Raba'i Mawlahum. So he is not from them in origin, rather he is ascribed to them by way of wala. By way of wala, like Imam al-Bukhari is ascribed to al-Ju'fi. Either one of his grandfathers accepted Islam on the hands of a person from this tribe, or he was a freed slave who was freed by a person of this tribe. As far as Ibn Majah, then it is a nickname, a laqab of his father. His father, Yazid, his nickname, his laqab was Majah. His laqab was Majah. This is why he is known as Ibn Majah, the son of Majah. And the ascription to, or al-Qazwini, it is ascription to the city of Qazwin, which is from the cities today in the country of Iran. A city today in the country of Iran known by the same name, Qazwin. He was born in the city of Qazwin in the year 209 after the hijrah of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. 209 after the hijrah of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And just like the remaining muhaddithin of that era, he sought knowledge of hadith and started gathering hadith from the muhaddithin, the scholars of hadith of his city and of his area, Qazwin in Khurasan. And we can try to derive the period in which he started seeking the knowledge of hadith by looking at the oldest of his shuyukh and his teachers. So from the oldest of his shuyukh is the muhaddith Ali ibn Muhammad al-Tunafisi. Ali ibn Muhammad al-Tunafisi, who passed away in the year 233. So if we subtract that from 209, we see that Imam Ibn Majah, rahimahullah, started seeking knowledge of hadith before reaching the age of 23. Before reaching the age of 23 or 24 years of age. So he also started seeking this knowledge at a young age. And he traveled, after gathering the hadith from the scholars of his area, he traveled to the vast Muslim lands and the centers of hadith in that time and sought knowledge of hadith from the scholars that are present in this area. So he traveled to the various areas in Khurasan, after which he entered Iraq and he entered Baghdad, the capital of Iraq, and he heard hadith from the great muhaddith Abu Khaythama Zuhair ibn Harb an-Nasai, and he entered al-Basra, and he entered al-Kufa, where he heard from the great muhaddithin of this area, and he entered Sham after that, and he traveled to Dimashq, Syria, Damascus, where he heard from the muhaddithin of this area. He heard from Duhaym, the great muhaddith, the hafiz, Duhaym, which is his laqab. He is known by Duhaym al-Shami, but his name is Abdurrahman ibn Ibrahim al-Uthmani. Abdurrahman ibn Ibrahim al-Uthmani. And he traveled to Misr, Egypt, where he learned or heard hadith from the great scholars of that area, such as Yunus bin Abdul A'la as-Sadafi. Yunus bin Abdul A'la as-Sadafi. Abdul A'la as-Sadafi. And Ahmad ibn Amr ibn Sarh. Ahmad ibn Amr ibn Sarh, and other than them. And we can see in the map, the image that is being presented in front of you. This is the one before it. This is the map of Iran, and this is the province of Qazvin and the city of Qazvin in this province, where Imam Ibn Majah was born. Go to the next. So this is Qazvin. These are the other cities in Iran today where Imam Ibn Majah was born. And as you can see here, this is Ar-Rai, Tehran, the capital of Iran today. So he was born in the city of Qazvin, to the northwest of Tehran, of Ar-Rai. The next, and this is the travels of this Imam in seeking the knowledge of hadith, where he left from Qazvin, where he was born, and he traveled in the various cities of Khurasan, such as Ar-Rai, Nisabur, Maro, Bukhara, Samarkand, hearing from the muhaddithin in this area, after which he entered Iraq, Baghdad, Kufa, Basra. Then he went to Hijaz, Mecca and Medina, after which he went to Misr, and he went to Sham and heard hadith from the scholars in this area of Baytul Maqdis, Dimashq, Damascus, Hims, and other than it. So this was the vast rihla of this Imam in seeking and collecting the hadith of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. As far as the students of Imam Ibn Majah, then there are several in number. From the most famous of them is Muhammad ibn Isa as-Saffar. Muhammad ibn Isa as-Saffar, and Ahmad ibn Ibrahim al-Qazwini, and Ahmad ibn Rawh al-Baghdadi, and other than them. As far as the praise of the scholars upon this great Imam Ibn Majah, rahimahullah, then it is several in number. From them, the praise of Imam al-Khalili, al-Hafiz al-Imam al-Khalili. He says that Ibn Majah thiqatun kabir. Ibn Majah is from the highest of the memorizers and narrators of hadith. Muttafaqun alayh muhtajjun bihi. His religious integrity and his precision memorization is not in doubt. Lahu ma'rifa bil hadith wa hifz. He has knowledge of the science of hadith in detail and memorization. Imam al-Zahabi rahimahullah, he mentions that al-Hafiz al-Kabir, al-Mufassir, the great Hafiz and the Mufassir, the one who has written tafsir of the Quran, as we will mention inshallah in his books. Sahib al-Sunan wa tafsir wa tarikh wa muhaddith tilka ad-diyar. Imam al-Zahabi mentions that he was the muhaddith, the scholar of hadith of that area of Qazvin. Sahib al-Sunan wa tafsir wa tarikh, the author of the book of al-Sunan and al-Tafsir and al-Tarikh. And we will mention later on that these are the only 3 books that Imam Ibn Majah authored. And this is in difference to the remaining 5 scholars of hadith that we studied. We mentioned they have several books. They have several books. Some of them have reached us, some of them have not reached us. But Imam Ibn Majah only authored 3 books. And the only one that has reached us in totality is Sunan Ibn Majah. And we'll talk about this later on when we talk about his books. Imam al-Mizzi, the great Hafiz, Imam al-Mizzi, he says about Ibn Majah, al-Hafiz, Sahib Kitab al-Sunan, Dhu at-Tasanif al-Nafi'a wal-Rihla al-Wasi'a. Imam Ibn Majah is a Hafiz, a memorizer of Hadith, from the great Huffaz. He is the author of the book al-Sunan, and he has other beneficial books, and he has a great travel, Rihla, in the seeking of the Hadith of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. As far as his books, as we said, then he did not author except 3 books. The most important of them and the most well-known of them is the book As-Sunan, which we'll talk about in detail inshallah. The second book is at-Tarikh. At-Tarikh. And at-Tarikh, the books of Tawarikh near the Muhaddithin, they are not books of history that give, or in the linguistic meaning of this word, Tarikh means history. They are not books of history. Rather, they are Tarikh al-Ruwat, al-Rijal, biographies of the narrators of Hadith. This is what Tarikh and Tawarikh means near the Muhaddithin, the scholars of Hadith. The biographies of the narrators of Hadith. So Imam Ibn Majah authored this book, which was a great book, a vast book, as the scholars, some of the scholars which this book reached in past times, they have talked about this book, and they have mentioned some of the statements of Imam Ibn Majah from this book in their books. So from that we find and we learn that it was a great book. Imam Muhammad ibn Tahir al-Maqdisi, Ibn al-Qaysarani, Abu al-Fadl, that we have mentioned several times, he says, رأيت له بقزوين تاريخا على الرجال والأمصار من أحد الصحابة إلى عصره. That I traveled to Qazvin and I saw his book at-Tarikh. I saw his book at-Tarikh that he had authored for the biographies of the narrators of Hadith from the time of the Sahaba until his time. From the time of the Sahaba until his time. The third book that he has is at-Tafsir. At-Tafsir. And we also learn from returning to the books of the earlier scholars that this tafsir reached them, that it was also a great tafsir. He wrote a tafsir of the Quran, a great tafsir based upon the Athar and the Ahadith and the Sunan. But sadly, and this tafsir was narrated by chains of narrations, like is the way of the Muhaddithin. They narrate the tafsir by way of asanid, chains of narration. Like the scholars of the past who lived in that era where nothing was mentioned except with a chain of narration. So Imam Ibn Majah had a great tafsir which he narrated by chain of narration, but sadly this tafsir also has not reached us. This tafsir has not reached us. As far as his death, rahimahullah, then he passed away in the year 273 after the hijrah of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. 273. So he was born in 209 and he passed away in 273, meaning he reached almost 64 years of age. 64 years of age. After this extremely brief biography of this great Imam, we now move on to his book As-Sunan. And the name of this book, as the author has named it itself, is As-Sunan. Just this word, like we mentioned with Sunan Abi Dawud, As-Sunan. And we derived several meanings from this word that can be also said here. That can also be said here. And we'll talk about that in detail inshallah. From the methodology of the author, Imam Ibn Majah, in this book, is that he is different than all of the 5 books that we have covered in deriving or understanding his methodology. We said that Imam Bukhari, even though he doesn't have an introduction to his book, he has not written a treatise in explanation of the conditions and methodology of his book, but we can derive his methodology from his title, the title that he has named his book with. Same thing with Imam Muslim. And Imam Muslim, in addition to the title, he has an introduction to his book, in which he has talked about in detail the methodology he followed in this book. Sunan Abi Dawud, we said the title is just a Sunan. There is no introduction he wrote, but he has a treatise to the scholars of Makkah in which he talked about his book in detail, mentioning his conditions and his methodology. So we benefited from that. Imam an-Nasai, Imam at-Tirmidhi. We said first, he has a big title that we benefit from. Secondly, he has an introduction to the book at the end of the book, which is called al-Ilal al-Saghir, in which he has talked about the methodology of his book. Sunan an-Nasai, we benefited from the title al-Mushtaba. We benefited from the title al-Mushtaba. But for Sunan Ibn Majah, we have nothing except the word as-Sunan. There's no introduction in which he explained the methodology of his book. And there's no treatise that he wrote. As we can see, he only wrote 3 books: at-Tarikh, at-Tafsir, as-Sunan. There's no treatise where we can refer to which explain the methodology of his book. So the only way to find the methodology of his book is to research his book, to read his book that the scholars before us have done, and they have extracted his methodology from the way he organized and structured his book. So we say from that which differentiates Sunan Ibn Majah from the other books that we have discussed is that it has a great introduction, muqaddimah. But as we said, this muqaddimah is not talking about his methodology in his book, not talking about his conditions in his book. Rather, this muqaddimah only has a hadith that he narrated in ordering the Muslim to follow the sunnah of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and to refrain from innovation, and to refrain from lying upon Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and to refrain from ar-rai, personal desires and viewpoints, and al-qiyas al-fasid, analogy that is falsehood. And in this muqaddimah, he has mentioned a hadith in refutation of the various deviant sects and groups in Islam. And he has mentioned a hadith in virtue of knowledge and the science of hadith and knowledge of hadith. So this is a great introduction that every Muslim should read, because it contains important hadith related to following the sunnah, staying away from innovation and its people, and it contains great principles that a Muslim can benefit from. This introduction is not present, this kind of introduction, in the other books of hadith that we discussed. And a similar introduction in Bab al-Faida, in benefit, a similar introduction is found in another book, a very important book, and it is also a great introduction that contains these important hadith related to following the sunnah, staying away from innovation and his people, etc. No. As we said, Sahih Muslim, his introduction is related to the methodology and the conditions of his book, which he has discussed. Musnad al-Darimi. Imam al-Darimi in his Musnad and his Sunan also has a similar introduction, a great introduction, where he has collected these ahadith that teach the reader or guide him to the implementation of the sunnah of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and to stay away from innovation and his people. So this is one difference between Ibn Majah and the other books that we discuss. Second thing we'll mention about his methodology is that, as we saw from the title of this book, As-Sunan, it is not from the books of As-Sihah. So Imam Ibn Majah has not just gathered, compiled authentic ahadith in this book. Rather, this book, like the other books of Sunan, it contains Sahih, Hasan and Da'if ahadith. It contains all three types of ahadith, Sahih, Hasan and Da'if ahadith. Rather, it is different from the 5 books that we studied because it contains the most weak ahadith in comparison to the other 3 Sunan, books of Sunan that we studied, Abu Dawud, Tirmidhi and Nasai. The most weak ahadith are found in Sunan Ibn Majah. Rather, there is a good chunk of ahadith that are mawdu, fabricated, that are fabricated in Sunan, that one can find in Sunan Ibn Majah. And his condition in the narrators of the hadith is extremely lax. So he has narrated on narrators that are weak, but rather than them, some of them are also held accountable or blamed to have lied upon Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Al-Muttahimin bil-Kadhib, those narrators who have been held accountable or blamed to have lied upon the authority of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and their ahadith, as we know, is called mawdu, ahadith that are fabricated or lies. And Imam Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, as we have repeatedly said, he is from the scholars of al-Istiqra' tam. The one, if he says something, we pay extreme attention to, because he gathered knowledge and sciences and books and manuscripts that it didn't reach anybody during his time or after his time. So when he speaks with something, he speaks on total knowledge. So he has studied this book in detail, and he has mentioned detailed numbers that he has mentioned for Sahih Bukhari. When we mentioned from Fathul Bari, he has mentioned detailed numbers about this book that give us an idea of what this book contains. So he says that the number of ahadith that are zawaid in Sunan Ibn Majah that are not present in the remaining 5 books of hadith are 1,339. 1,339. From how many ahadith? The total number of ahadith in Sunan Ibn Majah are 4,341 ahadith. 4,341 ahadith. From 4,341 ahadith, 1,339 ahadith are not found in the other 5 books of hadith, which is a large number, which is an extremely large number. As we said, some of these books like Sahih al-Bukhari, without repetition, they only contain 2,600 ahadith almost. So for this book to contain almost 1,350 give and take ahadith that are not found in the 5 books of hadith, this is a great number. And this is the sole reason that we mentioned why the scholars added Sunan Ibn Majah to be from the 6 books of hadith. This great number of zawaid that are found in Sunan Ibn Majah, because it contains this great number of hadith that are not found in the other 5 books of hadith. If this book contained, most of these ahadith were found in the other 5 books, then there was no point in adding this book to the 5 books of hadith. As we said with Muwatta Malik, some of the scholars were of the opinion that the 6th book is Muwatta Malik, but most of the hadith of Muwatta Malik are found in Bukhari and Muslim. So basically all of Muwatta, or most of it, has been incorporated in Sahih Bukhari and Muslim. So this is one of the sole reasons that Sunan Ibn Majah was deemed the 6th book of hadith, because of this great number of zawaid. He has almost 1,350 ahadith that are not found in the 5 books of hadith. Then Hafiz ibn Hajar continues, from 1,339 ahadith, 428 hadith are sahih. 428 from these ahadith that are not found in the 5 books of hadith, they are sahih. they are Sahih, authentic. And 613 are da'if. 613 are weak, but not reaching the severe levels of weakness that they cannot be raised the level to Hasan li ghayrihi. If the chains of narrations are compiled, they might reach the level of Hasan li ghayrihi, to be acceptable ahadith. Then he says 99 of these ahadith are extremely weak. 99 are extremely weak, that cannot be raised a rank, that can never become authentic. And 78 are mawdu. 78 ahadith are fabricated. 78 ahadith are fabricated. So this is precise numbers from this great Imam Hafiz Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani that give us an idea of the book Sunan Ibn Majah and the ahadith that are contained in it. As far as the narrators of hadith, then Hafiz Ibn Hajar rahimahullah, he says that Ibn Majah has 800, almost 800 narrators of hadith, that none of the 5 books of hadith narrated hadith upon them. There are 800 narrators of hadith in the chains of narration of Ibn Majah that is not found in the remaining 5 books of hadith. From them, 104 are the extremely weak narrators. From them, 104 are extremely weak narrators. So these numbers give us an idea of why Sunan Ibn Majah was considered, or is considered, the least authentic of the 6 books of hadith, and it is the last in order in terms of authenticity due to this great number of weak ahadith and narrators that are found in it. Rather, it has this large chunk of ahadith that are extremely weak or fabricated, and it has this large chunk of narrators of hadith that are extremely weak. And from the methodologies of Imam Ibn Majah is that he has great tabwibat, chapter headings, deriving fiqh from these ahadith, like the scholars before him. He has great tabwibat deriving fiqh from the ahadith that are present in his book and making them the chapter headings. From his methodology is that he narrates the hadith in one place without repeating it. He narrates the hadith in one place without repeating it, like some of the scholars that we have mentioned before. And we mentioned before that Ibn Majah has how many thulasiyat? 5. He has the most thulasiyat after Imam al-Bukhari. We said that the most thulasiyat are in Imam Sahih al-Bukhari, 22 thulasiyat. That between the author and the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is only 3 narrators. So the most are in Bukhari, then the highest number is in Sunan Ibn Majah. There are 5 thulasiyat in Sunan Ibn Majah, and we mentioned that there's only 1 thulasi in Sunan Abi Dawud and Tirmidhi. And we mentioned that there's no thulasi hadith in Sahih Muslim and Sunan Nasai. So he has the most thulasiyat. But all of these thulasiyat, these 5 thulasiyat, 5 ahadith, 5 texts are narrated with the same isnad. He has heard these 5 hadith from the same sheikh, who has heard it from the same sheikh, who has heard it from the same sahabi, on the authority of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And that chain is that he has heard these ahadith from Jubara ibn Mughallis. His sheikh is called Jubara ibn Mughallis. And Kathir ibn Sulaim. The sheikh of Jubara is Kathir ibn Sulaim and Anas ibn Malik radiyallahu anhu. And Anas ibn Malik on the authority of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And Jubara ibn Mughallis, the sheikh of Ibn Majah, is da'if, is weak. Is weak. And his sheikh, Kathir ibn Sulaim, is also da'if. He is also weak. So these thulasiyat, these 5 thulasiyat in Sunan Ibn Majah, all of them are weak. All of them are weak ahadith. They are with the same chain of narration that contain these 2 weak narrators. From his methodology is that he mentions the athar of the Sahaba and the Tabi'een in his book, the Mawqufat and Maqtu'at. Those ahadith that end at the statement of the Sahaba or the Tabi'een, their statements and their actions, and they are not raised to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And this is the case for most of the narrations he has mentioned in his muqaddimah, in his introduction. Most of the narrations in the muqaddimah and in the introduction that talk about following the sunnah and leaving off innovation and his people and warning from the various sects, these are narrated statements from the Sahaba and the Tabi'een. And that which is very important to mention regarding Sunan Ibn Majah is that regarding its name being a Sunan, it is from the books of al-Jawami'. It is from the books of al-Jawami'. So it is not like Sunan Abi Dawud or Sunan an-Nasai, al-Sughra, al-Mushtaba. Rather, it is like Jami', at-Tirmidhi and Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim, in that it contains all types of ahadith. In addition to the ahadith of ahkam and fiqh, it contains ahadith related to the seerah and fadail and tarhib wa targhib and other than them. So it is from the books of al-Jawami'. It is from the books of al-Jawami', even though he has named it as Sunan. And we have talked about this, that there are some books in which the name, the meaning of this name opposes that which is found in this book. That which is found in his book, like Musnad al-Darimi, the name is Musnad, but this book is not arranged on the names of the Sahaba. Rather, it is arranged on the chapters of fiqh. But why did Imam Darimi call it Musnad? Because it contains Musnad ahadith. It contains Musnad ahadith. So similarly, we can say here that even though Sunan Ibn Majah is from the books of al-Jawami', he named it Sunan, like we said before, because it contains the Sunnah of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Most of the ahadith in this book are marfu ahadith, al-marfu ahadith. As far as the position or the status of the ahadith in his book, we have mentioned the very precise numbers of Hafiz ibn Hajar al-Asqalani regarding the Zawaid in this book. So this book contains all types of ahadith: Sahih hadith, Hasan hadith, Da'if hadith, those that are Shadid al-Da'f and those that are Mawdu', those that are fabricated. And he is not like Imam at-Tirmidhi or Imam an-Nasai or hatta Imam Abu Dawud, who mention the defects or rule upon this ahadith. Imam Abu Dawud, as he mentioned, that if it is extremely weak, I will rule upon this hadith and mention it to the reader. Imam Tirmidhi rules upon every hadith. Imam Nasai also mentioned the defects, the ilal of these ahadith. But Imam Ibn Majah remains silent. He does not rule upon these ahadith or mention their defects. And as we said, man asnada faqad ahala. He has freed himself by mentioning the chain of narration. So the scholars of hadith, the student of hadith, when they read this asanid, if there's a wadda', kazzab narrator, they will know this hadith is fabricated. This hadith is fabricated. And as we mentioned, the number of ahadith in Sunan Ibn Majah is 4,341. As far as his status amongst the 6 books of hadith, then we talked about this before, that first of all, the scholars differed as to which is the 6th book of hadith between Muwatta Malik and Musnad al-Darimi and Sunan Ibn Majah. But after the 7th and 8th century, the scholars have basically have been united that the 6th book is Sunan Ibn Majah, and this is because of the large number of zawaid that are found in this book, and it is the least of the 6 books of hadith in authenticity. As far as the books that have serviced or the ulama have written in service of this book, then even though some books have been written in service of this book, it is similar or close to being similar to Sunan an-Nasai. Sadly, not many explanations of this book were written in the early generations. And the earliest of them that has reached us, that is published, is also Hashiyah of Imam as-Suyuti and Hashiyat as-Sindi. Just like Imam as-Suyuti and Sindi has Hashiyah, brief notes on Sunan Nasai, similarly they have brief notes on Sunan Ibn Majah, and they are published together with Sunan Ibn Majah. At the bottom you can find these notes of Imam as-Suyuti and Imam Muhammad bin Abdul Hadi as-Sindi. But Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala, as we said during Sunan an-Nasai, that He raised scholars in this era that have that have written books in service of this book. So from the most important of the explanations of the scholars of our era in this book is the great book of Al-Allama Muhammad Al-Amin Ibn Abdullah Al-Harari Al-Ethiopi. Muhammad Al-Amin Ibn Abdullah Al-Harari Al-Ethiopi. It is extremely weird and strange that two scholars from Habasha, from Ethiopia, they travel to Mecca and they reside in Mecca their whole life. One of them writes this great explanation of Sunan an-Nasai, Zakhiratul Uqba, and another writes this great explanation of Sunan Ibn Majah, and both of them passed away a few months apart. The explanation of Al-Allama Muhammad Al-Amin Ibn Abdullah Al-Ethiopi is called Murshid Zawil Hija wal Haja ila Sunan Ibn Majah. Murshid Zawil Hija wal Haja ila Sunan Ibn Majah. This is a complete explanation, a vast explanation of this book, which is published in almost 27 or 28 volumes. It is published in 27 or 28 volumes. And from the distinguishing aspects of Zakhiratul Uqba and Murshid Zawil Hija wal Haja is that both of these scholars from Habasha were upon the Aqidah of the Salaf. Both of these scholars were on the Aqidah of the Salaf, so you will not find mistakes in Aqidah in their explanations. And with this, we have completed our brief notes on these 6 books of Hadith. And as we said at the beginning of this seminar, that we are in need of several sittings, hours upon hours, to just study one book in detail, let alone 6 books in such a short period of time. But I hope that what was presented is something that gave a general idea to the listener about how these 6 books came about, and what was the methodology of the authors of these books in their books, and what were the conditions, and why these books are held in such high regard, and what is the connection of these books with each other, what these books contain that are similar to each other, what differentiates one from the other, what are the distinguishing aspects of one from the other. And I hope that Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala accepts from us that we presented and blesses us with ikhlas in our statements and in actions. Wallahu ta'ala alam, wa sallallahu wa sallama ala nabiyyina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallama tasliman kathira. If there are any questions regarding Sunan Ibn Majah, no, or any question in general, inshallah, we will try to answer them.
I was told that Sheikh Al-Bani was asked by Sheikh Hikmat Bashir.
No.
He asked them to Google check Tafsir al-Tabari. So then Al-Bani said him. So maybe the sheikhs told you to check in your books and so that we're going to see.
Allah al-Mustan. May Allah forgive us for our shortcomings. I mean, from the well-known sayings of Imam al-Khatib al-Baghdadi, rahimahullah, who was the Imam and Hafiz of the Mashriq in Iraq. He lived in Baghdad, the capital of Iraq. Passed away in the year 463 after the Hijrah. From the great muhaddithin of his time, from the great Huffaz. He has a very famous saying in which he says that Man arad al-fa'ida fal-yukassir qalam al-nasakh wal-yakhudh qalam al-takhrij. That the student of hadith, student of knowledge who wants to benefit in this science, then he should break or leave off writing a hadith, and he should focus his attention towards making takhrij of ahadith, gathering the chains of narrations of the ahadith, studying them and then ruling upon them. As I said, no hadith can be ruled upon except after completely gathering the chains of narrations of this hadith. Once you gather the chains of narrations, then one can implement these principles to rule upon this hadith. And this science of hadith, it is not taq'idi ilm or ilmun nazari. It is ilmun tadbiki. Science of hadith, it is not knowledge that is just heard or studied. Is principles, they are not just studied and read and memorized. Rather, it is a applied science. It is a applied science. One cannot gain profession in this science except that he applies it. The more he applies these principles, the more he critiques narrators and ahadith, the more he will advance in this science. So regarding your question, we always try to do takhrij, and who knows if they will ever come to light for others to read, or it will be something that just we benefit from.
Sheikh Sharif said you had like a goal for us here in North America, so you didn't really give us the details, Sheikh, of what you're trying to educate us with.
Allahu Alam. I mean, everyone has aims and objectives and goals, and we always have the highest of goals, and we make dua to Allah Ta'ala that He blesses us and gives us tawfiq, guidance that we reach that level. That is the most I can say about that. No.
So, during the time of Prophet Muhammad we know Sahaba started writing the Ahadith. Why did it take 2 centuries for an organized effort? Like all these imams came in the century,
yeah.
200 years after Hijrah. So, and we know, there were Khalifas after Prophet Muhammad who had led for writing the Quran, and they have all made all. Why was there no organized effort for the first 200 centuries, for the first 200 years? And had there been any effort, it would have been a lot easier to gather hadith, because it all originated from one place, Makkah, Medina. So it would have been a lot easier. There wouldn't have been any need for the travel.
This is a very vast question, and the last semester, the last seminar, knowledge summit we had with Fadilat al-Sheikh, the Professor Dr. Zainul Abidin bin Muhammad Bala Faraj, was on this topic of compilation of the Sunnah. This is a separate topic than that which we are discussing right now. The compilation of the Sunnah, this topic deals with what you have asked. What were the various levels that the Sunnah went through until it reach these books and then it reached us? What was its progression? How did it progress? The historical history of how the Sunnah progressed throughout the centuries until it reached us. And this seminar was about just one aspect or one level from the various levels that in which the Sunnah has been compiled, to study the methodologies of some of these books to give an idea about the differences between these books. Regarding your question, then the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he lived for a period of 23 years in which these ahadith came about, and the Sahaba Ridwanullahi alayhim ajma'in, they memorized them. They were people of memorization, and some of them wrote these ahadith, such as known for Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As radiyallahu anhu. He had a scroll that he used to call Sahifa Sadiqa, the truthful scroll, in which he had compiled the hadith he had heard from Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Similar, Ali bin Abi Talib, he had a scroll. Some of the other Sahaba, they had scrolls. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself ordered some of the Sahaba to write. In the inception of Islam, at the beginning, he had forbade them to write, in order for the Quran to not be mixed with other than it. But when this fear was removed after Islam had grown, he ordered some of the Sahaba to write, such as Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As himself. He went to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and he said that, I write everything I hear from you. So the Quraysh, they forbade me, saying that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam speaks in occasions of happiness and in anger. So do not write everything you hear from him. So when the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam heard this, he said, "Uktub فالذي نفسي بيده لا يخرج منه إلا الحق." That write, for verily, he swear by Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala, that nothing comes out of my tongue except that it is the truth. It is revelation from Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala. So he ordered him to continue writing. Similarly, when he conquered Makkah, Fath Makkah, one of the Sahaba, he requested the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam to write the khutbah or the sermon that he presented in front of the Muslims when he conquered Makkah. So when the Sahaba requested that from him, he ordered some of the Sahaba by saying, "Uktubu li Abi Shah, Uktubu li Abu Shah." That was the kunya of this Sahabi radiallahu anhu. So some of the Sahaba wrote. We have that established. And as I said, their basis was upon memorization. They were people of memorization. This is what differentiated the Arabs from other than them. After them came their students, the Tabi'een. And the Sunnah continued this way. Most of the Tabi'een were memorizers, reaching the highest level of memory. Their stories cannot be enumerated in mentioning the highest level they reached in memorization. And Shaykh Zainul Abidin Hafidhullah mentioned some of these stories. And some of them continued to write. Some of them had scrolls, suhuf, sahifa with them. In the later part of the Tabi'een, when one of their Imams, Ibn Shihab al-Zuhri, who passed away in the year 124 after the Hijrah of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When Islam spread to foreign lands and various sects and groups arise from these lands and lying upon the authority of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam became widespread, the ruler of the Muslims of that time, who was Umar bin Abdul Aziz al-Umawi, from the great rulers, from the righteous rulers of the Umawi Caliphate, he ordered the greatest scholar of hadith that was alive at that time, Ibn Shihab al-Zuhri, Muhammad ibn Muslim ibn Shihab az-Zuhri, and he ordered him saying, write to all the countries and cities of the Muslims, as long as the Islamic Caliphate spread, and collect from their scholars the ahadith of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Tell them to write to you the ahadith of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the scholars in these areas, various cities and countries of the Islamic nation, every one of them started to compile the hadith that was present amongst the scholars in that area. So the scholars of hadith in Makkah compiled the ahadith that were present in Makkah. The scholars of Medina compiled the ahadith that were present in Medina. The scholars of Kufa, Basra, Baghdad, Dimashq, Khurasan, and other areas, they started compiling the ahadith that were present in those areas. And these were great scholars of hadith, the Kibar Muhaddithin, Abdullah ibn Mubarak, Imam al-Awza'i, Imam Sufyan al-Thawri, and other than like great scholars of hadith, they started compiling the sunnah that was present in their areas, and they started their travels in order to compile the sunnah. From them, some of them started authoring books from the ahadith they had compiled. From the ahadith they have compiled. From them is Imam Malik. Imam Malik, who passed away in 189 after the hijrah of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he wrote his great book Al-Muwatta, which at that time was known as the most authentic book of hadith. Imam al-Shafi'i himself said that the most authentic book after the book of Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala is the book of Imam Malik, Muwatta. And of course this was before Bukhari and Muslim. Imam Shafi'i passed away in 204, the year that Bukhari was born. The year that 10 years after Bukhari was born, before Bukhari even started collecting and compiling his book. So he said that at that time. And other books came into existence at that time. There were other muwatta'at that were authored. After which the scholars, they had two ways of authoring in the sunnah. One way was the way of the masanid. The way of the masanid, which is to gather the hadith of a single sahabi in one place. So Musnad Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, all his ahadith in one place. Musnad Umar, all his ahadith in one place. Musnad Uthman, all his ahadith in one place. Not upon chapters of jurisprudence. So from the earliest of these books is the book Musnad at-Tayalisi. Musnad at-Tayalisi. He passed away in the year 204. The same year as Imam al-Shafi'i. 204. And then a lot of masanid came to existence at this time. Several of the masanid, the scholars wrote books of masanid, like Ishaq ibn Rahuya. He has a Musnad Ishaq. Imam Ahmad, the biggest, largest Musnad that has reached us, Musnad Ahmad ibn Hanbal in 241. And why did it start with masanid? Because they were people of memorization. As we said, a Musnad, a person cannot truly benefit from them except that he is a memorizer. This and a Musnad makes it easy for the memorizer to memorize the hadith. How does it make it easy? Because once you memorize, a person gets mixed up with the sahabi. This hadith is from the Musnad of which sahabi. But when you have one Musnad, you are memorizing all the hadith of Abu Huraira. It's easy for you to know that all of these hadiths are from the hadith of Abu Huraira. So they wrote the Masani for this reason, to aid in memorization, to preserve the memorization. And from in the same period came, or a little later, Musannafat that you see behind us. Musannaf Abu Abdul Razak al-San'ani in 211 after the Hijrah. Musannaf Ibn Abi Shayba in 235. In which they also started preserving, along with the hadith, the athar of the Sahaba, so that they also preserved in written form the sayings of the Sahaba and the Tabi'in. Also those started getting compiled, so they also saved and preserved for later generations that we benefit from until today. So after this these levels that the Sunnah went through and these books came to existence, then came, as you said, Imam Bukhari, rahimahullah, and Imam Muslim, and the scholars after him. So they benefited from this vast history that expanded 200 years. They benefited all these books and scrolls that were before them. So in Bukhari and Muslim, you will find Muwatta almost in its totality present. Almost all of the hadith and Muwatta are present in Bukhari and Muslim. You will find, for example, there was a Sahifa, scroll of Hammam ibn Munabbih from the scholars of Tabi'een. He had a vast scroll that had several hadith, which is published, alhamdulillah. It used to be thought that it has been lost. It has been lost, but from the greatest, from one of the great scholars of India, Dr. Hamidullah, rahimahullah, who was from the city of Hyderabad, he found a manuscript of this book in one of the libraries in Europe, and he published this book. Sahifa Hammam ibn Munabbih. This Sahifa, until it was published, how did we benefit from it? Its totality is present in Musnad Ahmad. Musnad Ahmad, Imam Ahmad in its totality has narrated this Sahifa by saying, this is the Sahifa, scroll of Hammam ibn Munabbih, mentions one isnad and then mentions several hadith. The whole scroll is preserved. So Imam Bukhari, Imam Muslim, these scholars benefited from this entire effort that was made. This is a continuation of that effort. And much of the effort that was made has been preserved in these books. It has been preserved in these books. Then after them came additional efforts to preserve the Sunnah, like Sahih ibn Khuzaymah, Sahih ibn Hibban, Mustadrak Hakim that we said. Additional hadith that Imam Bukhari and Muslim did not write, they compiled and collected, and this continued for several centuries until the Sunnah, alhamdulillah, was preserved in written format. But in memorized format, it was there from the beginning. It was there from the beginning. Now.
So when we say Sahih al-Ahrar, and then there's two kinds of basically concepts of the hadith, such as there's the shawahid, which I understand is the same text with different
Sahaba. No.
Okay, so mutaba'at, what is that exactly?
Mutaba'at, as I said, the Sahabi is the same, but it is chains of narrations of that hadith that meet with the same Sahabi. So that hadith, for example, Imam Bukhari narrates it on his shaykh, but Imam Muslim narrates the same hadith on another shaykh. So this is a mutaba.
But it goes back to, for example, Abu Hurairah.
Yeah, at the top it is the same Sahabi. But these chains of narrations give strength to this hadith. And if the hadith is weak, if it is in a book that is not from its conditions to only narrate Sahih hadith like Bukhari and Muslim, in Abu Dawud and Tirmidhi, then these chains of narration can raise this hadith to a rank of Hasan li ghayrihi. Hasan li ghayrihi, acceptable. There's some questions from the sisters. Is it true that Imam Muslim didn't like al-Bukhari? From the first sessions we held in the seminar, we mentioned the praise of the scholars on Imam al-Bukhari, and from the praise we mentioned was the praise of Imam Muslim rahimahullah, that he came to him and he said, "Let me kiss you, O Ustad al-Ustadhin, O scholar of the scholars, wa Sayyid al-Muhaddithin, leader of the scholars of hadith, wa Tabib al-Hadith fi ilali, and the curer of the hidden defects of hadith, And we mentioned the praise of Imam Muslim where he said that لا يبغضك إلا حاسد, that no one has jealousy and enmity for you except that he is a jealous enemy of Islam and the Sunnah. So what praise can be bigger than this praise? And that which shows the love of Imam Muslim for his Shaykh and Ustad Imam al-Bukhari rahimahullah. Now, if there are any other questions related to the topic? No.
Just if you can repeat, Shaykh Albani had ruling on what books?
Shaykh al-Albani rahimahullah, he saw a great need in our times to rule upon the 6 books of hadith.
So he had
The 4 books of the Sunan al-Arba. The Sunan al-Arba, Abu Dawud, Tirmidhi, Nasai and Ibn Majah. So this was from that which he spent a great deal of time and effort in which after gathering the asanid and the chains of narration, every single ahadith in this book, he ruled upon them and he separated the authentic from the non-authentic, and they are all published. All these books are published. Sahih Sunan Abi Dawud, Da'if Sunan Abi Dawud, Sahih Jami' Tirmidhi, Da'if Jami' Tirmidhi. And then after he passed away, rahimahullah, or at the end of his lifetime, some of his students, they combined both of these books. So you will have Sunan Abi Dawud as it is, the proper edition of Sunan Abi Dawud, but at the end of it they have put his rulings. So they will say, or at the beginning, I guess in the English version, they have put his ruling in brackets at the end or the beginning of the text, Sahih, Da'if. So this was a great effort of Imam al-Albani of our times, rahimahullah. Now.
Just wanted to quickly confirm a few things. Number one, did Imam Tirmidhi rahimahullah create his own istilahat like Hasan Sahih for any specific reason? Because Imam Dhahabi, like rahimahullah, he says that it's basically like
The same as Sahih, yeah.
I'm sure is it because maybe to show that his, like what he would consider to be Hasan is like
as I said, these are the 2 main statements of the scholars in this issue. Some say Sahih Hasan means that this hadith has several chains, some of them are Sahih, some of them are Hasan. And the second statement was that Sahih Hasan is the same as Sahih. And we said this is a topic that the scholars have greatly differed in. From the statements of the scholars is that Sahih Hasan is something that is higher than Sahih. Something that is higher than Sahih. Because there's an addition here of Hasan. So this addition gives proof that it is something that is higher than Sahih. And some have said the opposite. Some of the scholars says Hasanun Sahih is less than Sahih. So as I said, this is an area that is of vast difference amongst the scholars. But we said that what seems apparent to us from studying the book of Sunan Jami' Tirmidhi is that Hasanun Sahih is the same meaning as Sahih. And regardless of this, as I said, both Sahih and Hasan ahadith, they are all acceptable ahadith, maqbool. Both Sahih and Hasan are called hadithun maqbool, acceptable ahadith that one can follow and implement. Now, and we'll finish with this question, inshallah.
Just 3 questions, and I don't want you to get into too deep. If it only takes 5 minutes, okay, or 2 minutes. If it takes longer, then you don't have to. The 5 conditions, just if you can repeat them quickly what they were. And number 2, the tabaqa, just so we can understand the first level, second level, third level. And the last question, what should we do now as Muslims in the West that have very little knowledge of what we know now? What do we need to do with this? Where do we go with this? These 2 questions. Okay.
As far as the 5 conditions in order to deem a hadith authentic, then as we mentioned, the first is ittisal, being the connection of the chain of narration of this hadith. So every narrator should have heard this hadith from his shaykh and teacher, and him from his shaykh and him from his shaykh until it reaches the Sahabi radiallahu anhu, and he narrates upon the authority of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's the first condition. Second and third condition relate to the narrator himself. This narrator has to be adlun dabit. He has to be trustworthy in his religion, and he has to have a specific high level of memorization, ability of memorization. And the last two conditions are that this hadith should not be shadh or mu'all. As-salamatu min ash-shududhi wal-illah. That this hadith, first of all, should not be mu'all, having al-illah, a hidden defect, and it should not be shadh, meaning that this hadith, the narrators of this hadith, one of them has not opposed, this opposition, has not opposed another narrator who is more of a memorizer or authentic than him, or a group of narrators. This single narrator has not opposed a group of narrators. And when this opposition occurs, when this narrator, for example, narrates this hadith as being marfu, from the statement of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and another narrator that is more authentic than him, of a higher level in his memorization, or there are a group of narrators who have narrated this hadith as being from the statement of Abu Hurairah, for example. So in this case, this hadith that is from the statement of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it is called shaz. It has opposed the correct hadith, which is called mahfuz, the preserved sahih, the correct hadith, that this is a athar of Abu Hurairah, this is not a hadith of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So these are the 5 conditions. Regarding the tabaqat, then the example was mentioned of the tabaqat, the levels of the students of Imam Ibn Shihab al-Zuhri, because he is from the ulama that the scholars have mentioned that the asanid revolve around. He is from the scholar muhaddithin that the asanid revolve around. So Imam al-Hazimi rahimahullah, he has mentioned that his students are of 4 levels. The first are those who are the thiqat, yani adlun dabit. They are trustworthy in their religion, and they have reached the highest level of memorization. They are thiqat, the highest level of memorization. But along with this, they have spent a long time with Imam al-Zuhri. A long time with Imam al-Zuhri. This is the first level. The second level are the same. They are the thiqat. They are adlun dabit. They have reached the highest level of memorization, but they have not spent a long time with Imam al-Zuhri rahimahullah. The third level are those narrators that are disagreed upon between being authentic and weak, between thiqa and da'if, but they have spent a long time with Imam al-Zuhri rahimahullah. And the fourth level are those narrators that, along with being differed upon from being authentic and weak, they are, along with that, they have not spent a long time with Imam al-Zuhri rahimahullah. As far as the last question, which is in relation to what is next, or what one can do with this knowledge, as we said, this knowledge or this science of hadith, it is a bahrun la sahila lahu. It is an ocean that has no boundaries or borders. The more a person researches and studies this science, the more he realizes how ignorant he is. And the only advice that can be given is the Muslims to be diligent in seeking knowledge, is to seek knowledge and follow the proper steps of seeking knowledge. So a Muslim should not start with that which is of a higher degree and leave off that which is of a lesser degree. It is extremely important in seeking knowledge to be systematic, to be progressive. Otherwise, a Muslim can spend years and years and decades, but he will not benefit anything. He will attain information, thaqafa. He can be called a muthaqqaf who has information, but he cannot reach the level of talibul ilm, a student of knowledge, or even an alim after that. So one should start with that which is the most important, or the beginning, and then go to the next level. So from the beginning, parts of seeking this knowledge, especially the science of hadith, is to learn the Arabic language. Is to learn the Arabic language. Because this science, as we said, is a applied science. It is a applied science. So one cannot apply this science except by referring to the books that have been authored in this field and referring to the statements of the scholars in this field upon narrators, upon chains of narration. And all of this is in Arabic. All of this is in Arabic. You will never find it in any other language, because if a person could benefit from these books in any other language, he would have known Arabic. No one refers back to these books or reads these books except that he has reached that level. These are specialized books that only an expert or a student of knowledge in this field utilizes. So from the beginning steps is for a person to learn Arabic, and then to study this science with a scholar or a student of knowledge of this science, and to practice and apply this science, to do takhrij. Of course, he'll make a lot of mistakes in the beginning, but with these mistakes, he will improve and keep improving until he will reach a level, inshallah, in which he can benefit others. And it is a long process that takes several years, like any other science and any other subject that a person wants to learn. As a person spends several years in other subjects, he should spend that or more in this subject, because it is directly connected with our religion. Connected with our religion. That's the only advice I can give. Wallahu ta'ala alam. Wa sallallahu wa sallam ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa sahbihi wa sallam.